Welcome to LearnLogicPro.com. Today we're going to look at just simply adding tracks. So the template window open, let's click Empty Project. When you first get into an empty project, the first dialog box you essentially see is the new track option. So I'm going to go ahead and walk you through this. At the very top of the new tracks you've got number of tracks. Obviously you can put a specific number of tracks you would like to add. You have type of tracks, audio, software, external, MIDI. In audio, you have the different format of an audio track, be it mono, stereo, or surround. You can also specify the input. Now on my audio interface I have just input 1 and 2, but you may have an audio interface or multiple audio interfaces that could have a number of inputs, up to 16 or 32. You can also specify audio tracks with a bus input if you chose to. One thing I did want to mention is if you have an audio interface with multiple audio inputs, say 2 or more, you can input those ascending, meaning when you create the tracks, if you specify 8 audio inputs and you ascend, the 8 tracks have input 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. So the inputs are ascending down the amount of inputs that you have available to you. So if you have 32 inputs and you want those 32 audio tracks to have their own input ascending down 1 through 32, you want to check that box. That stands true for the output as well. You can send out ascending. If you have an audio interface with 8 outputs, you can send all 8 outputs at one point, just clicking this button on the ascending. You can also output to a bus if you chose to. That's also an option for you. Below that is input monitoring. Now, if you are going to record into a computer, you have to arm the computer to hear. In the old days, we had to actually hit the record button to hear what was going through Logic. Now we have an input monitoring option that allows you to hear what's coming in without having to arm the track. Below that we have Record Enable. Record Enable essentially does that. It enables that track to be recorded on. Now the record button has to be clicked on. If you create tracks and you need to turn it on, you have to click on it. Now if you have 32 tracks that you want to record enable, essentially you have to click 32 times. So having this as an option, you can make 164 tracks and record enable them all at once if you're recording a full orchestra or whatever. So that's definitely a time saver from having to click the button a number of times. So to create these tracks, you just hit create here and it creates the track. It also opened the library here, so it's all ready to go to add effects if you chose to. You can also add software instrument tracks. Now software instrument tracks are tracks that are virtual instruments, software, samplers, synthesizers, the Rhodes, the B3, the different products that are inside Logic, and also third-party plugins that you may have loaded in. These software instruments can also be multi-timbral, meaning that the one instrument can play 16, 8, 16, 32 MIDI tracks at once, kind of like what we had to do when we had an old keyboard that had 16-part multi-timbral. The plugins are having the same effect now, and you would want to check that if it is multi-timbral. Below that you have external MIDI. Now some of us still have hardware pieces that we'd like to trigger from Logic, and this is the track that you would use to trigger that external device. You would have to set up your MIDI devices in the Audio MIDI Manager of the Mac OS or in the environment of Logic to choose them, but here you would choose the track for the external MIDI. So we chose a software instrument track. This is what it looks like. Just creates those tracks and again opens up the library. Now there's one thing I did want to mention. I keep hitting the plus symbol to bring that dialog window back up. That's all you really need to do. You would also have an option to duplicate the setting. So if you have, say for instance, we're going to go ahead and put a piano on here. If you have a piano in here and you've played a specific part and you want to duplicate that piano, you want to affect it separately, but you don't want to obviously ruin the first track that you have, this next button is very powerful because what it essentially does is it duplicates that track, but it puts it on its own instrument, meaning that I can now affect this, put a delay on it, reverb, and I retained the original track completely untouched by those changes. So it is duplicate setting. Here there's an entire section for tracks, new, duplicate setting, next MIDI channel. Say for instance you have set out some MIDI and there's key commands for these. Next channel with next channel strip setting, new with the same channel strip setting, new with overlapped regions, new for selected regions. So if you have selected regions, you want a new track for those, you just select those tracks and create a new track for them. Delete. Delete unused is really pretty cool because if you have a bunch of tracks that you've created and you're not using them, they're no longer in the arrange window, you can delete those unused tracks. You can create a new track name, delete the track name, or sort tracks by a specific option, either track name, output channel, or audio channel, and it'll sort them accordingly. One last thing, you can change the name of these tracks by simply choosing the text tool here and just clicking to change the name, double-clicking to change the name. That's adding tracks in Learn Logic Pro.